Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar. You're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash. Yeah.
Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
Whoa, Nelly. We are back at it, the Libertarian Podcast Review. This is Tyler Janke, episode 49. We're almost way to half of a century mark, right? I think, even numbers and big, divisible numbers are really a big deal, right? Those are the podcast episodes that everyone is happy about. No, they're milestones. That's really what it is. And we're coming up on a milestone. We had a milestone recently with the Reno Libertarian Party out in Reno, and it's caused a flurry of problems, a furor, if you will, because there's a lot of Nazis going on here, commentary. So what are we going to do today? Well, first of all, welcome to the Libertarian Podcast Review. What do? We review podcasts, we review podcast episodes, we review clips. Sometimes we do clip shows, and this is kind of one of those shows where we're going to just break down a podcast, the Neoliberal Podcast with Jeremiah Johnson. It sounds fake. And he had on Doug and Wendy Weiner. If you ever remember from the 80s, there was a 80s, 90s, I think. 80s, I'm pretty sure. A skit on Saturday Night Live from Doug and Wendy Weiner, two big complainers. And that's who we have here. But before that, before even we get there, did you know that Marc Clair is a confirmed Fed? And I don't know if I should even play this clip or not, but I think I'm going to do it. And so let's just add it in here. And I'm starting to understand at least why Marc Clair is now been determined to be, why I say he's a Fed, but why, oh, well, look at that. We got some problems here. Why he's coming out against the Mises Caucus. Part of that is it's all planned. I think it's subversive action and why he's a Fed. Let's go here, play this clip. He was on Tower Power Hour. I need to make sure that the volume is going to be fine. Okay, let's take it away, Marc Clair.
What's happening?
Yeah, they drove through the top
but then I've also seen the fucking video footage of the nukes dropping and blowing shit up, and I've seen the fucking carnage and the all the kids with like fucking third heads growing off their heads.
You know what's definitely bullshit are those videos of like people that put on glasses and like watch the house blow away and for the test nukes. You ever seen that stuff in the 50s? Like, yeah, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, there's nukes, and now I'm like, oh, that's the dumbest fucking bull I've ever seen in my life. Like, hide under your desk.
Well, the best one is the whole, like, if they show you, okay, I'm going to show you pictures of the nuke that hit Nagasaki and, like, the aftermath. And then they'll be like, oh, actually, this is just after the firebombing in Tokyo. And it's literally, and you'd be like,
we mixed up the footage again.
Yeah, they literally.
Like the Kentucky firing range that was like the Syria video or whatever.
Okay, that's where we're stopping. And what point is, they go on here, the Tower Power guys, Marc Clair, to deny the existence of nuclear energy fission. I think that's nuclear decay, radiation, all that stuff. It's bull. And so here's the problem you have when you start to, and this is why I say he's a Fed, when you start to be so outrageous in some of your conspiracy theories and knockdowns, then you take away the legitimate ones, right? And I just saw, it just made me think about this, and it's somewhat of a joke here. But I saw Adam Fitzpatrick, I think he was on Year Zero, Tommy Salmon's podcast, and he was talking about the 9/11 stuff. And what I love about him, and he does this, Scott Horton does too, they hate the truthers in a sense, because it takes, there's so many, it's like, oh, there's a thread, there's not even a thread of evidence, but then you make speculations and you try to make these graphs. Next thing you know, everything's fake. And those kind of people are Feds because they end up making none of the good conspiracies actually worthwhile. So Marc Clair, nuclear energy is a real thing. And before we get into the heavy haul here today, I mean, who else was on that podcast there? Cole's an engineer. He should a mechanical engineer, not just a civil. So I think he is. I think he's working as a civil, but he did mechanical. All right, people. Neoliberal Podcast. First of all, what have I been doing? I was on Porcupine Podcast with Adam Nutter. Kelly Patrick just had me on his podcast. We talked about Reno and some of these other things. And then Outlawed Thoughts, Leighton Radner. We had a ton of people on. It was 9 of us, I think, on there last night. So check those out. Good stuff. Shannon was on there. Who else? David. I can't remember everybody, but there was a lot of good people. So check that out. Okay. Joseph Bishop Henchman and Andy Craig go to they left the Libertarian Party. So DL has done a breakdown of this. He got the retweet from Dave, and I had been planning to do this episode as soon as it came out. I listened to the whole thing. I started taking notes on it. And my notes are nothing more than whatever the timestamps for this that I want to then commentate on it. So I do it. And by the way, I decided not to watch DLs. I started to look and I'm like, oh, I don't want to see this because I had done all this work. So I still decided to put it out. So this may mirror his. Maybe there's some things in common. Maybe there's some things not. But how I do this is I like to listen to it. I think about it. And then I find the spots where I want to do the clips. And I play the clip, and then I just react in real time. I don't make a script about it. I mean, I make some notes, kind of like what's happening in this point. So we go through there. So I don't know what DL said, and I'm sure it was great because Dave Smith retweeted him, and it blew my whole episode apart. So here we are today. Just to set the stage, Joseph Bishop Henchman had been the chairman of the Libertarian Party. I want to say maybe 2 years ago or so, and then he quit. Okay, and he talks a little bit about that, and I think he's a little deceptive here. And Andy Craig quit the Libertarian Party. He works for Cato, and so now the Libertarian Party has been taken over, and so here's a whole podcast about it. And I think it's really important to kind of look at this. All I kept thinking, and I want you to think about this the whole time, is plank 3.5 that was removed. Why was it removed? And I think it's exactly for these kind of people in this kind of instance is why it's removed, because it can be used as a sort. Matter of fact, I do domestic violence restraining orders all the time. So if you guys ever want to talk about red flag laws and how the CLET system is done to take people's guns and rights away, the restraining order process is a prime example of that one. People come in. I just had one today. I mean, it's easy. We're finding out, ladies totally making up accusations, but it's used as a sword because they don't want the other party to get custody of the child. So they're making up claims, and you're always defending them, always fighting them against them. And that's what you're doing here with plank 3.5 about irrational and repugnant. You are actually taking it away. You're taking away the sword that people like this, and I say people like this, is Joseph Bishop JBH and Andy Craig use it as a sword. They just say you're racist, you're a white nationalist and whatnot. And now you're repugnant and irrational, and they shouldn't have anything to do with you, and the party shouldn't have anything to do with you. When the reality is, using if you're against biases and racial all problems that you have, racists themselves, you could go after them without having to take some sort of pledge. Okay, so let's get right into it. This is a Neoliberal Podcast with Jeremiah Johnson. Once again, there's a movie called Jeremiah Johnson, like 1972. It's got to be fake. What's wrong with the Libertarian Party? Featuring JBH and Andrew Craig. I'm reading this off of his own the Neoliberal Podcast description. The Libertarian Party has been taken over by a white nationalist group. How did this happen? Former LNC chairman Joseph Bishop Henchman and Andy Craig of the Cato Institute joined the show to discuss what's gone wrong with the Libertarian Party. And there you go. Opening credits. Okay, so we are going to jump right in, and I'm going to play some clips. Once again, we're not editing shit out of here. We're just taking this on as it comes. And so I believe this is the first one. There we go. Starting 1 minute in, and we're going to give a little description here and I'm going to, once again, not quite 1.5 speed, but throttle it up just a little bit so we can get through all these clips, opening and the intro of the topics, extremist and shady stuff. Let's go. And let's go. So, since I had loaded these up earlier today, maybe it's going to take a little bit of time for us. There we go.
Libertarian Party, $25 so that I could become an official card-carrying member. It was the first time I ever did that because I was very influenced growing up by libertarian writers and thinkers. And even though I don't call myself a libertarian any longer, I still consider myself to have libertarian instincts in some ways and to be influenced by many of those ideas. And that's why it was really disheartening to see recently the Libertarian Party had its national convention, and they were taken over by a group of extremists and people with a lot of shady stuff going on. And I thought it would be a good idea to talk through what's happening with the Libertarian Party and the movement and why this is going on. Joining me today are two libertarians who have very graciously agreed to join this podcast to talk about negative things about the Libertarian Party, despite the fact that they are libertarians, and we appreciate them for taking.
Okay, so first of all, look, making some wide accusations there. You expect something like, and by the way, the NPR vibe that's given off in here, just making my dick shrivel. So that's annoying. But regardless, that's the way he does it. That's fine. That's your wonderful show, Jeremiah Johnson. And I'm going to be a little condescending only because I've listened to this multiple times. And so I feel like I have the right to be, because they're going to say some pretty heavy stuff. And so when you're going to make accusations, you need to have some defense of this. I've done this multiple times, different defenses of different videos that we've done here. And I always try to show, and I'm going to do that today. I'm going to try to show the evidence that we have. So that's the first part you had there. Now, let's find out who, and it was important to see how you're going to structure that part. So this is now, we're in 5 minutes in. Is this the one I want? Make sure I'm getting, 5 minutes in. No, that's not the one I wanted. I've already got trouble here. So let me get this one. Okay, so this is the next one we have going in here. And this is going to be who these people are. And I think it's important to understand who we're talking about, or who is talking about us, if that's who is in fact talking. So here we go.
Despite the fact that they are libertarians, and we appreciate them for taking that jump. Andy Craig is a staff writer at the Cato Institute. And Joseph Bishop Henchman is an executive vice president at the National Taxpayers Union, and he's the former chair of the Libertarian National Committee. And Andy and Joseph are joining us to talk about what's happened with the Libertarian Party, because it's had a pretty dramatic decline in the last week. There's a lot of people who are very concerned about this. Andy and Joe, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Hi, thanks for having us.
I do want to thank you guys for coming on, because it is a little bit of an awkward situation to be a libertarian and something horrible has happened with the Libertarian Party, and you have to go on and be like, well, yes, the libertarians are bad now. It's a little bit of an awkward situation. So I want to acknowledge that up front, that, I am putting you slightly in an awkward position.
Well, I think it's important because, I'm sorry, Andy, I was just going to say, I think it's important because I think in the next year or two, there's going to be moments where people come across something from the Libertarian Party and they're going to be like, wow, the Libertarian Party said that or did that. And, because people don't follow this.
And by the way, break in here, he's acting as if we haven't been doing that for the last 8 years.
Stuff as closely as obviously as Andy or I do. And they're going to search around for an answer for that. And, this podcast could serve as that answer for a lot of people to explain why things will be so dramatically different now.
And to clarify, we're both ideological libertarians, and we were both were heavily involved in the party, but we both quit about a year ago. Joe resigned as chair. We've both since left our party membership, so we are, as they say, lowercase l libertarians now. So I have certainly don't have any truck to carry on defending the party and its reputation, and it's exactly like Joe said, that over the next year or two, we expect you're going to see some pretty gross things coming out of it.
Okay, so I don't know if it's that clip or the next one, but doesn't matter. That's who those guys are. So Andy Craig works at the Cato Institute, and I thought we'd play a quick thing about the Cato. And also Joseph Bishop Henchman works at the NTFU, that's National Tax Union Foundation or something like that. So National Foundation. Anyway, so I thought I would look those up because I made an assertion on Kelly Patrick's podcast last night that these guys were basically, they'd never had a real job. Okay. So I looked up Andy Craig. He works at Cato. That's all I can find is that he's a staff writer for Cato. And what I mean by real jobs is something outside the Beltway, something outside some sort of institute, organization that we've actually been doing something. So Andy Craig, it looks like he's just been a writer at Cato his whole life. That's all I could find. I couldn't find any educational things about him. Fine, dandy. Seems like a not a job I'd be proud of necessarily. So there you go. That's one. And then Joseph Bishop Henchman. So he's an attorney. And I found out he works at this place called NT. Here, I'll bring it up here. National Taxpayer Union Foundation. Okay, so you look there on the website and it talks about how he worked 14 years prior at the Tax Foundation, a tax policy education nonprofit. But before that, he had come to them from McDermott, Will, and Emery law firm. So I was like, oh, okay. So I guess he has been out there, had to do some billing. So you look at their website, and they said that in August 22 of 2019, he joined MWEF after 14 years with the Tax Foundation. Okay, so he'd been 14 years. Then he goes to this place on August 22, 2019, and then that's when they announced it. And then June 5th of 2020, 9 months later, he's now left for the NTAUF. So he worked 9 months in legit work, private work. Yeah, he's still a joke. I'm sorry. It's great. He does tax policy stuff. He whatever, but he's never done. I mean, I'm sorry, 9 months working for, and then it was probably just a joke even going through there. So one thing you could take is these guys quit the party. They decided it was time for them to leave, and this is important, I think, because they're not staying in the whole form fighting, right? The background is important because they've lived their lives in DC. They're not out there in the working man, and everything, typical libertarian or Republican Democrat world is different to them because they are inoculated in the DC culture. Now, we're done with that one. We'd go with war property views, but I thought we would take a look real quick at something that was it came across. Actually, it's probably the next one. Then we'll go to that one. So we are now 5 minutes in. Still, what's wrong with the Libertarian Party? This one is warped view of property rights. And I'm going to have to reboot and go.
Called the Mises Caucus, named after the economist Ludwig von Mises. And this group essentially has a racist.
I thought I'd just make one more comment too. Andy Craig had done a debate with Dave Smith on Lions of Liberty, and the title was, "Is Dave Smith alt-right?" Dave Smith, preposterous. But anyway, here you go.
Basically, white nationalists lean to it, and this group sees they won every seat. They won every seat on the national committee, and now they appear to be in full control of the party. So I guess my first question would just be, what's the setup here? Like, how did this happen? Was this a long time coming, or was this out of nowhere?
It wasn't out of nowhere, although I'm sure some people may perceive it as such, certainly if they weren't following it very closely. There can be a lot of explanations here, structural ones, personality ones, cause and effect ones and everything. But I mean, the gist of it is that the Libertarian Party ran Gary Johnson and Bill Weld in 2016, and at least by third party in America standards, did relatively well. Got 3% of the vote, secured permanent ballot access, got a lot of favorable coverage in the press, a lot of new supporters and donors and activists. A lot of people really.
Okay, and make some comments here, so I don't forget. So 3% of the vote, I think it was more close to 3.5, and they're touting that. And yes, the Libertarian Party does tout that, the biggest, I think, result that they had ever had. But you have to look at it in context with what was the nature of politics at the time. Everyone was done. There was a lot of people that didn't want Trump. They didn't want Hillary. They were the two most hated people going in, and you get 3%. Now, 3%, great, 3.5. But if you actually take a look at the time, because I remember this, I was following it pretty closely, and through Reason, actually, Matt Welch kept reporting things on the Fifth Column, and then the Reason podcast. They were polling closer to 5. It was going to be a big deal. So 5, 6%, and then suddenly it starts collapsing. The more you start getting to know Gary Johnson, Aleppo, it starts collapsing more and more, and that's what you ended up having. So you end up failing even within your own metrics.
Back excited. A lot of people exposed to the ideas of freedom and a humane country that rests on rule of law and champions individual rights and supports immigration and supports all the other great things about the liberal and libertarian ideas, liberal in the classical sense. And there was a reaction to that, where some people don't support immigration, and some people don't support diversity in all of its forms, and some people don't support They view these things as deviationist. And it kind of culminated, I guess, after my predecessor as chair condemned what happened in Charlottesville. The white supremacist gathering was there. And there was a reaction to that where people thought the Libertarian Party shouldn't be condemning these people. And that's when this caucus was formed after that, in reaction to that, with the goal of changing the party so that it wasn't opposing these kinds of things. And I've never really understood it. On paper, this caucus talks about Mises and Austrian economics and all of that. And I mean, I've read Hayek, I've read Baumberg, I've studied abroad in Austria. I feel like I understand Austrian economics, but that's not really what it's about any more than like North Korea's state UK ideology is something tangible, or China's thoughts of the leader are a tangible thing. A lot of it is just wanting to divide this populist notion of dividing the world into us and them, and us, and they very clearly define who them is, and them is anybody who has a cosmopolitan view of the world, who views rights as human rights, and is willing to go along with a lot of that stuff, and doesn't really prioritize rule of law or democracy or individual rights, other than a very warped view of property rights. And
okay, so a few quick things there. Once again, plank 3.5, using it as a sword rather than to uphold principles. Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, horrible thing that happened. They did not come out and say, well, they did afterwards. Nick said you need to take some sort of pledge, but it was mostly to try to go against people like Tom Woods and Jeff Deist, who had just done a speech a few weeks earlier about blood and soil. He had mentioned something in there about libertarians need to understand these factors. And then someone at the Unite the Right rally had made the same comment, and boom, they use it once again as to try to bludgeon you, because you're not going to take this. Bishop Henchman made the comment there that it was used in a matter of they didn't want to. They wanted to support the Unite the Right rally rather than condemning it or whatnot, and it's not how those things took place. So he's obviously a little bit there. Now take a also look there at a lot of these declarative statements. This is going to happen throughout here, and I hope you understand. Had a problem with Saifuddin a few weeks ago, where he made some ridiculous statements and then never supported them. He gave facts, and then if you look up those facts, they're full of shit. Sorry, I've been kind of sick too. Declarative statements of just like, he is a white nationalist. Okay, then because, and then say why. Now they're going to try to say why later on, but it's pretty bad. So let's go to the next one here. The anti-wokeness crusaders. I do want to play a clip from Fifth Column that I think is actually pertinent as well. I don't know if at some point, if I have it in these clips, that Andy Craig references Ken White, Pope Hat, and that's kind of the part I would use. But I also want to show kind of the backstabbing behavior of the what do you call it? Cato Institute. Okay, so this one is anti-wokeness.
Familiar to anybody who's on political Twitter and has seen the kind of anti-wokeness crusaders is how they themselves probably prefer to define it. Where if you do a rainbow flag for pride, that's too woke. If you say Black Lives Matter, that's too woke. So that's very even whatever pretense, these are not people who really care about marginal utility and the subjective theory of value, in spite of the Mises name. What they're really focused on is the Libertarian Party and most of the libertarian movement had always been very proud that we're socially liberal. We were accepting of and advocating gay equality decades before mainstream politics, and that sort of thing. We were all eager for criminal justice reform when the George Floyd protest happened and that sort of thing. The party was pro-choice until a few days ago when they changed that. So I think if you're trying to understand kind of the real big energy focus, just kind of imagine all the right-wing podcasters that like to rant about how cultural Marxism is and wokeness is destroying America, and it's basically that.
Okay, so a few items there, and Josh Bishop Henchman had kind of mentioned it earlier about you not taking the human rights and flying the flag of the BLM or pride flags. Right? Look, this is I think something Dave has made mention of many times, and it's actually I've been able to really kind of ingratiate a lot of my family and friends with libertarianism with this idea, which is You can be, and this is the Ron Paul thing with drugs. You can be fined for not criminalizing these behaviors. You don't have to embrace these behaviors. I mean, I'm all for fine. You know, you have a camera and porn is fine, and you take the camera away. Now it's just prostitution. That seems stupid to me, right? That shouldn't be illegal to consenting adults. Do I want my daughters to do that? Absolutely not. And you know, our principles and the lives that we lead, that's likely not going to happen. I'd be very shocked if that were the case. However, I'm not gonna advocate it, but I'm going to defend you if you get caught in these situations and say that there shouldn't be criminalized. I think that's a big deal. Much like the BLM stuff, pride flag, I'm no problems. But if I don't have to accept any of your behaviors. You don't have to accept my behaviors, and you don't have to. And they're not, by the way, the things that, once again, because it's irrational and repugnant, they get to decide what is that, and then use it against you. So let's go to, I want to play this one here. It's a little backup, but I think it plays into this to some extent, which is Ilya Shapiro. He got hired by Georgetown, and then he's had a tweet about the BJ Jackson Brown, the Supreme Court justice that just got nominated, the black lady, and he's like, it's horrible that you basically, I'm gonna totally paraphrase what he was saying and probably not even do well that, but basically a tweet about how you should be, here's this other progressive, this guy, he's perfectly fine, but she is not the most qualified, and you're just picking her because of her genitalia and her melanin. So he gets basically retires from resigns his newly positioned job at Georgetown, and gets a little busted up for it. So here's one clip kind of talking about some of that.
Our audio issues, which we had prior to you coming on. Had a lot of those recently. I just opened Twitter as we were kind of sitting here doing nothing. And the first thing that came up, this was tweeted, I think, 35 minutes ago or something, was from Ken White, the legal eagle, I think ex-libertarian, probably at this point, guy on Twitter who said, screen capped you, said you were going on Tucker Carlson, and said, weird. And then followed up by referring to you as a right-wing hack / victim / grifter. And a lot of people pile on that. I mean, how do you respond to people who not only take what your tweet in what I think reasonably call bad faith, but then say this is all part of some larger grifter thing that you've been a part of for some time? I mean, I find it very odd that it has 1,300 likes in a very short period of time calling you a right-wing hack, victim, and grifter. How do you respond to Ken White on that?
I mean, I don't know how much you need to monetize to be able to be a grifter. I mean, I found a new job. I announced my new job at the Manhattan Institute. I'm going to be their new director of constitutional studies. I announced that on Tucker Carlson, as one does. I'm not sure whether, to manufacture, to strategize this whole thing.
Okay, I'm not going to go into more of these. I just think it's important to understand how people are using this. And I was on a podcast with the Australian guys a few months ago, and we were talking about Josh Zepps, who had been ripping on Tim Pool, calling him alt-right. So you just say a name. Once again, this thoughts in your mind that it's irrational and repugnant. So you just call someone, a racist, or you call them, like that guy. He's alt-right, right-wing racist guy. And suddenly you don't get to, now you're defending yourself against these screeds, and you don't get to actually have poignant conversations because it's not even worth it. Why would you have a conversation? And later on, Andy and them talk about, Andy and Joseph talk about the Skokie, Illinois, and the march there, and the Nazis being able, the Klansmen, I think it was the Nazis actually being able to do there and defending their right to do so without actually, becoming these themselves. Yes, and the fact they don't see the irony of the fact that Dave Smith and other people can associate and have conversations with these people without absorbing their points of view, because this is the left tactic. And by the way, this is why I'm not a fan of, and I'm using, by the way, just back up a little bit here. I know there's gay people, there's two trans that I know of in the Mises Caucus, and James Gentleman, as an example, just had a conversation with Thaddeus Russell, and I'm going to reference it again later on here. But he had talked basically about the groomers and calling people. I'm not a fan of that either, of just blanket calling everyone that, because then it dumbs it down. And then when you do have the groomers, it's like, oh, well, everyone to use a groomer. It's like Nazis. So I don't appreciate it when the other side does it, and I'm not a fan of it myself, and I don't use those words. So let's say one more thing with the fifth column, and then we'll be done with their podcast, which just wrangles in here. And I thought I would emphasize it due to the conversation and the fact that Andy works at Cato. Ilya had worked at Cato, and he's going to talk about that right now.
a back channel to the dean or
Mhm.
any or all of the above. That was tremendously gratifying. The main negative surprise was that the Cato Institute, where I spent almost 15 years, was completely silent.
Oh.
You would think that an institution devoted to free speech and academic freedom and integrity would have done something about that, let alone any conceptions of loyalty to me.
Why do you think that was?
That will have to be the subject for a different podcast.
Okay, but it sounds like it didn't surprise you.
Let's just say it didn't surprise me as much as it would have 5 years ago.
Sure.
There are certain tendencies at Cato, both managerial and ideological, that have been going in directions that I think are not good, not just with respect to me, but in terms of promoting Cato's own values.
Got it. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I've heard something like that before, but from someone who I would probably describe as like a left libertarian.
Okay, so Camille's talking to left libertarians. Good for you. No, so I thought that was really important. Cato just threw him under the bus, something innocuous that he should have been defended in the speech, but that's Cato, right? We've been having a lot of trouble with Cato recently, and that's part of it. And Andy Craig is the structure that you're seeing. Ilya Salmon, another one that's in my open, that he's a libertarian for masks and vaccines. Woof. And by the way, we'll get a few of those comments here from these guys as well. Okay. Let's step into the next one. 12 minutes in, we're still cruising along here. This is where a lot of the hits come. They're going to show us some evidence as to white supremacy, Nazis, Hitler praising, whatnot. Take it away, Jeremiah Johnson.
As articles that offer these weird, soft-pedaled defenses of Hitler in the 1930s, and
he's talking about the Mises Caucus website, which will
talk about how Hitler just wanted to be a great man, like Otto von Bismarck or whatever. Their preferred presidential candidate, a comic named Dave Smith, is basically an open white nationalist who says that he thinks it's a scientific fact that blacks are genetically less intelligent than other races. He uses transphobic slurs that I'm not going to repeat here, but he basically says all trans people are liars. Their identity is a lie. And he calls them the slur that you're probably thinking of. He goes around with a list of who's who on the alt-right, like Stefan Molyneux and Nick Fuentes and Richard Spencer and Gavin McInnes and all the podcast alt-right that you're probably thinking of.
I just want to notice the slide there. Richard Spencer, Stefan Molyneux. There's a vast difference in gradations between those. Nick Fuentes, and we'll just do it right now. He's debated Nick Fuentes. That was a very good debate. One, it's awesome to see the Dave go and debate Nick, because Nick is formidable. He's got who was I listening to? I think it was, I'm trying to remember who it was, but they were basically saying that if you know a subject, you can destroy anybody on it, whether you're the right or not on a debate. And so you've got to know your topic, and then you may be in the right, but don't know how to argue it, and you're gonna fail. So the fact is, Nick does that. He knows how his topic, and he will have those conversations. But Dave's the only one that I've really seen being able to work him down, and I love it because I think Nick's a little shit. And by the way, he's not anti-trans if you've heard the news lately. But Dave does a great job, and why would you not want to see these conversations? And anyway, well, let's get back to this.
So there's real open white nationalism here, and just bigotry of all kinds.
Show us.
And this is the group that we're talking about, right? It's not just, some libertarians think that it's really weird how woke people are. I feel like the complaining about wokeism is almost like the hook, and that's how they get you. And then they start trying to get people into the darker stuff.
I think that's right. And a lot of it, I mean, they would vehemently deny that we're
of course
white nationalists and whatnot, but it's absolutely true. The examples you cited.
Absolutely true. The examples you cited. I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this slide. So let's walk through them. Dave's an open white nationalist. He thinks that black people are inferior. It's probably a joke that he was telling, or on Skanks that he had mentioned. That's not open. This is ridiculous. What was the other one? He pals around with the alt-right guys. We've already mentioned that. He has debates with those. He's definitely not on board. And Molyneux's definitely taking different turns than Dave. Spencer, I don't know if he even had him on the show. I know he had the other guy that was part of the Unite the Right when he was a libertarian, and there was pushback. Dave's a Jew. That's but there's no factual pushback by Andy Craig, and I'm going to get into one of the other things that he mentioned here. But let's go.
It's a kind of I will give the family-friendly version of it, but if you follow Ken White on Twitter, Pope Hat, he has this thing called the rule of goats. Where if it doesn't matter if you say you are sleeping with the goat ironically, you are still sleeping with a goat, is the polite version of it. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that to it, where it's we want to own the libs, and what's the most own the libs thing you can do? It's to be racist or homophobic, and then sit back and say, haha, you got so mad when people get mad at you for being a crazy bigot. And so that's a lot of the dynamic that drives it, just like it does on so much of the online alt-right, which this is basically part of.
I'll just add, I mean, it's all very horrific stuff, and there's other examples beyond which that you've cited there.
Like what?
I'll also say that I don't think most of the supporters of this group have really understood, like, that's what this is about. I mean, there's a Confederate apologia component. There's a hurt trans people component of it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. I think there are a lot of people that think it really is.
Okay, so you've got to really twist yourself. The Southern Confederate apologia, I think that was something that Tom Woods had once spoke at a group in the South that had then changed their whole structure, and now they might be part of something else, but at the time they definitely weren't. I mean, that's you've got to twist yourself into all kinds of pretzels to get there, and it's very disingenuous. And these two guys, it could have been very easy for them to try to steelman their arguments and say we disagree with things, but this guy called Dave an outright white nationalist. He's a Jew, by the way. I don't know if that's even possible. Not to mention the fact that the Mises Caucus, when we had the bash there were two trans that were there. Talks about anti-hating trans. There were two black speakers that we had of prominence. Maj Toure Azubi, Maj and Hotep Jesus have been vilified by Bishop Henchman, Nick Sarwark, of even trying to. Matter of fact, Nick goes on with Justin Amash on his podcast right after the Reno thing and kind of rips on Nick about that. And so you want to, do these two guys have black friends? Either one of these two guys? No, they don't. Okay, so there's that part, and then I'm going to real quick here. This is the best I could find for where are we? There we go. For the Mises Caucus website. Let's see if we just pull the whole thing up here. This is an article on the website. It's written by Lawrence M. Vance. He works or is an associate at the Mises Institute, and the topic is Rethinking the Good War. Okay, this is all about, and I just once again, the Blackbird podcast with James Gentleman, he had Thaddeus Russell on there, and Thaddeus talks about blowback, and he references not this necessarily this article, but the same concept. So remember, he said, oh, they're kind of praising Hitler and soft talking it, and no. What this is, and I'll just read one question. It poses a question: was it necessary that tens of millions were slaughtered to prevent Hitler from slaughtering millions? I don't think saying that Hitler slaughtered millions is that he's a good guy. What the whole article is talking about was getting into World War II necessary. So when is questioning, and by the way, these two guys didn't push back and go, no, hey, we're not necessarily for foreign wars, or maybe World War II. You can question whether it was the right thing to do after the fact. No, it's just simply, oh, this guy's bashing them, and we're going to just go along. And that's the disingenuous part, because they just allow themselves to get sucked into all this other stuff. Okay, let's go to the next one. Doing as you're told. So this is a problem and thing I've noticed at the convention, which is the Mises Caucus had signs about how to vote different times, and we had a whole Discord and very well organized, and that's one way that you're able to trounce these people. But let's take a look, see what they have to say about that, because we're just mindless idiots.
Stuff there. I think there are a lot of people that think it really is just about Austrian economics and get lured in that way and don't really know what they're supporting. And there's a lot of people who were at this recent convention that people told me, I was not there, but people told me that they were just there to follow orders and vote as they were told, and didn't really even understand what they were doing or why. But they've been able to organize that and make that happen, and that's good enough to take over the party, especially now in COVID times, where a lot of longtime supporters of the Libertarian Party have been, especially in 2020 and 2021, wary about going to large, big events with lots of people. And so that really changes who's showing up at these events and casting votes for leadership.
Okay, so it's COVID's fault it's COVID's fault that the Mises Caucus took over. Fine. So we got one positive thing out of COVID. It's the takeover and the squashing of the Joe Bishop Henchman. I'll also say Nick Sarwark got up to the mic at one point. I've mentioned this on a few podcasts. Got up to the mic when they were trying to stall the vote because they thought that the day was done at 3 p.m. on Sunday, and that the place would shut down. And if we didn't get to all the planks and stuff, it'd just be done until the next convention, and we'd have to be done. And so he was slow rolling, getting the votes in. That's why he was over at that one time, way on the other side of where his actual table was, getting in a rough, he said someone assaulted him, right? He was over there because he was telling people, slow roll, don't get your votes in. California, who has the biggest delegation, had already got all our votes in. We were still waiting on like one of these small states that he was helping. And then they've announced, hey, the streaming system is done at 3, but we can have this place till midnight. Suddenly the game was done, and he went to the mic and he said, hey, look, this is like we've been in a 2-minute drill before the game's over. It's rushed. This is what we've got to do. He's like, he just announced we're here till midnight. The game's changed. We're now in overtime, and we can't delay, basically, is what he's saying. So he's telling his people how to vote and what to do. Mindless? I don't know. Plus, there's a lot of people there that don't know all the rules. So yes, you're getting input in that. And these guys making it sound mindless. It's a bit humorous and not quite the way it is. Once again, COVID seems like it saved the day for us. Glad to have that. Okay, next one we have going up here. This is mocking Mises, which is fine. That's what they want to do. It's 16 minutes in, and we're
I
getting
found
to
really
it.
interesting and funny at the convention. There's a video you can find on YouTube where Justin Amash, he was at the convention and he started reading out a bunch of quotes about how we need a cosmopolitan internationalist order that respects all people. And, it's very like kind of free love and hippie sounding. And it's, you could call it hippie libertarianism almost. And it's peace, love, international cooperation, blah, blah, blah. And he was getting some boos and some jeers. And then he revealed that all of the quotes were actually from Ludwig von Mises.
Shock.
And just basically trying to troll this group of trolls, I guess.
That's right. And I've had similar interactions before where, von Mises supported open borders. He was very, there's a whole extended section in Human Action where he very kind of viciously mocks racism and the whole idea of that any of this stuff matters. And so, yeah, it's certainly one of the sad things about it that his name has managed to be used the way it was. But that was kind of a fun moment with Amash trolling them, but it doesn't affect the outcome. And kind of the headline takeaway, I think the thing a lot of people noticed is, they took all the seats on the national committee, but they went out of their way to delete from the party platform a line that has been there basically since the start, almost 50 years since the party was started in the early 70s, that says, we condemn bigotry as irrational and repugnant.
And by the way, Karen Ann Harlos does a breakdown of this on her podcast. You can go check it out, where I think it was put in originally and then it's been removed, and it's just recently it's been put back in. So he says almost since the inception of the party, not quite, and it's a little misleading.
Which would seem to be a pretty uncontroversial statement to most people, you would think.
It would be.
That was one of their number one. It was basically their number one goal for the platform was to delete that sentence. Which is telling.
It's telling because it's a messaging thing. Like that is not actually advocating a policy. It's just stating a value. So if you go after it, you're telling people who you are.
And there was this explanatory. They set out an issue.
But does the absence of a plank mean that you adopt that? I mean, an absence of a statement. It doesn't. There's nothing in there that says I love my wife or something like that. But it doesn't mean I can't still love my wife. It's just I do love my wife.
Their orders, their script to all their followers that everybody that was leaked and obtained. And there's an explanation of why they're doing that. And it's basically we need to delete this to send a signal. Except they didn't use signal because anything they don't like they say is virtue signaling. But this is, I guess, vice signaling. We need to send a message that this party welcomes people who would be offended by this statement, who would be put off by this statement.
Okay, so total lie. And I think I'm trying to demonstrate over and over here with these comments of using the plank and these ideas as a sword rather than this is how I believe. So it's fine. If it was simply, well, this is how I believe or whatnot, we want to accept all people in, or their thing is like, oh, well, that's because you want to be able to accept Nazis in. No, it's because people like you have used it, and that when it was put in, and specifically trying to have some pledge by Nick Sarwark of having Tom Woods and some of these others sign it in a sense of you are using it to try to drown them out. You call them names. You calling Dave a white nationalist. If you're calling Dave a white nationalist and that thing's in there, now you get to use it as part of the plank of saying, no. Dave is, and so it's ridiculous because those are subjective ideas. And by the way, they're not even, Dave's aren't even that subjective. Now let's go to kind of there's a few items here. One is the thoughts about the Amash thing. And I thought just play a quick part here. Bob Woods did a little bit of a breakdown of that and I thought it was at least interesting and worthwhile.
But the last point I want to make is what Justin did. I'm virtually certain this happened. Is Mises in the text kept referring to what the liberal believes, because when Mises was writing, liberal did not mean what it means in today's climate. Mises meant, if you wanted to, I don't know if translate's the right word, if you wanted to add some nuance to it to make it clearer, you could put the word classical in front of it. So Mises would say, the classical liberal supports the free movement of people around the globe, does not support national boundaries restricting workers from moving from one country to another in search of higher wages or whatever. The classical liberal believes in free trade and peace. And so just so you understand what happened. So Justin Amash, he's reading these ostensible Mises quotes to the crowd, and on some of them getting them to boo it. He was changing what the quote was. Okay, so Mises did not say the libertarian believes blah, 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 or the libertarian position is such and such. Mises said the liberal believes blah, blah, blah. The liberal position on this issue is such and such. And when Justin was reading this to the crowd, he just changed the word liberal to libertarian. It didn't say that he was changing it. All right? And so now, to be clear, I'm not saying he did something deliberately dishonest. But my point is, it's a little bit weird for everyone then to be running around laughing and saying, the Mises Caucus idiots just booed their hero or their idol. Justin Amash got him when he changed the quotes. And in particular, if Amash had not changed the quotes, nobody would have booed.
Excellent. Way to say it. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And I thought you should also check out Hody John's Enemy of My Enemy, episode 4. It's like August 2021. I was trying to kind of going through that again today because it's at least he's horrible and another guy's horrible, but Jacob Daniels on there and he defends the Mises Caucus and there's some ridiculous stuff that they all talk about. And part of it is open borders and whatnot that, these people are talking about. The caucus doesn't have an open border stance or a closed border stance. It's probably split. I mean, we had differences in the party on some of the plank stuff, internal conversation between Eric. We're going to take Eric or we're going to take Josh Smith. And part of this is the fact that we understand Mises. We like Mises. He's named, the caucus is named after him, but we don't take everything that he has verbatim. And it's like the Bible truth, like these guys want to believe, because we're not a cult. I am part of the caucus, or anything else. So the fact is, you can, if you had said these are Mises, I think Bob's explanation there is actually perfect and right on. So there's a lot though. It's not the Rothbard caucus. It's not the Hans Hermann Hoppe caucus. It's the Mises caucus. And there's differences we take, and we don't. There's once again, he says it here, and they do it in the Hody John one. Which is, Mises was more about economics. He didn't talk about trans. Yeah, that's kind of our point too. We don't need to talk about trans, and we can just talk about economics, and we can be fine with that. Matter of fact, you're going to open the door to more people than not. Okay. Moving along. This one is, I'm not sure exactly what this quote is. All I have under this one is, what the fuck is this? So here we go.
See libertarian with a blue check mark next to it, and they assume that's an official statement. And so some of the stuff that was getting posted, that how Black people actually owe America, being posted on MLK Day, or how it'd be better if trans people were killed, if that meant we'd have no taxes. This stuff is very damaging to the overall brand. But now it's, I guess, a moot point because we're going to see it come from the National Party too.
Conversations about
Man,
it.
I'm skinnier.
But as Andy Craig, who's a member of the Pragmatist Caucus, who I really appreciate a lot and really appreciate what he authors, one of the things that he kind of called out is he's like, I was reading Human Action the other night, and I read a lot about, marginal utility and things like that, but I must have missed the parts about, keeping all of the trans people out of sports and whatnot. And it just seems like for a caucus that calls itself the Mises Caucus, which I have to admit I have a problem with, because I think the caucus is misrepresenting a man who I hold in great esteem.
Okay, so one, I was skinnier then. Two, Pete wasn't anti-Mises Caucus at the time, and check that episode out. It's pretty good, I must say. And three, So one, they're not reading Mises. That's bullshit. Two, he didn't talk about trans being able to do in sports, but he didn't, because he was talking about economics, and that's kind of our point, okay, buddy? Which is, we don't need to be talking about these things. You just talk about rights and economics and those kind of things, and you don't have to stress about being a misogynist and dominating women's sports as a man. Okay. If that's what you really want to do. Moving along. This one goes to New Hampshire. Take it away.
Over happens to the New Hampshire party. And there was a woman there who was the chair of the state party who wasn't on board with all this. They had basically the whole state party committee except this one woman who was still the chair. She, understandably, it was in a feeling of desperation. And so she tried to pull, we're going to have a split. We're going to have a schism, basically. And to make a long story short, it went to the National Party, and the National Party committee made the wrong call, basically sided with the group that was posting all that insane, bigoted crap. And it was Joe put it squarely before them. Are we going to kick the New Hampshire State Party out for this stuff?
And I should say, New Hampshire has kind of a special role.
Okay, we're not going to go around that. So just a quick note on that one. That's not completely true. They were taking over the party, and before they, I believe, even had done it, the Mises Caucus had basically done that there. There was a coup, and Joseph Bishop Henchman, I believe, was involved, and that's why I think he quit. He says it's over racist stuff. I believe if you were able, because I think then he trashed his emails, and so there's a lot of problems there, and he doesn't really talk about that. So I think I wish actually, and I think based on these comments and this kind of podcast, I think the Libertarian Party should do an internal investigation now that the real people are in charge, the adults, the ones that have probably had real jobs, and take a look and see what took place there. Okay. Keep going on here. This is more membership issues. I thought this was an interesting one as well.
Paid membership, the kind that you described at the beginning of sending the $25 in, that's fallen from 21,000 to I think it's under 17 now, kind of in a free fall. Donations have fallen 7 months straight, much more from like the kind of pledge donations, that's only off 10 or 20%, but major gifts is down by, I think it's like 80%. And there just have been a lot of people quit. I mean, in order to get elected chair, obviously I had to have a big network of libertarians, about 1,000 people who worked on my campaign and helped me be chair and helped run the party and everything. And at this point, like almost all of those people have now left the party in a very quick time frame. Many of those that were still there are now in the process of leaving after this national convention result.
Okay, so what do you say about that one? Well, the membership. Remember, this podcast took place almost immediately after the Reno convention. Matter of fact, June 3, so the next week. That means members were dying last year when Joe was involved, when Whitney or whatever her name was involved as well, when Nick was involved. This has been a decline, and it's to them, it's like, hey, the membership's already, it's a dying carcass. But there's also and then donations. So were they trying to kill it? And I think that's some of the accusations, that they've been intentionally trying to kill it, and instead of trying to actually do what's good. And this, by the way, this is petty, and understand petty people have been involved. Maybe that's a problem why it's been a kind of a piece of shit. 300 to 400,000, I think, donations, pledges, or at least money brought in since when the Mises Caucus took over, lifetime memberships and other people. That's kind of some of that out. So remember, they were driving out the members even before the Mises Caucus won. Okay. Cruising up. I think we only have like 3 or 4 more clips to play here. White supremacists in the LP, 30 minutes in.
You can go back to thinkers like Rothbard, who flirted with white supremacy, and Hoppe, who was an open and enthusiastic white supremacist. You can go back to like Ron Paul and his newsletters and all of the controversy around that. Why do you think that this has been such a longstanding feature of kind of the libertarian movement or the liberty movement, that this is something that has always been lurking in the background?
You hit on a lot of the history there in that question. I mean, for those who aren't familiar,
History of rumors and accusations without support.
Basically, if you go back to the late 80s, early 90s, there was this strain of paleo-libertarianism, they called it. And Murray Rothbard was very much kind of in the lead of it, who was a influential libertarian theorist and movement figure and had been for a long time before this.
And a Jew, keep that in mind.
And he wrote, anybody looking to understand it, kind of the text I would point to is Right-Wing Populism, a Strategy for the Paleo Movement. And this is an essay that Rothbard wrote in 1992. And it was right after David Duke had run for the, Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, had run for governor of Louisiana in 1991. And it, got a lot of attention and stuff. He made the runoff. And Rothbard starts this piece lamenting that Duke had lost. And it goes downhill from there. And, their basic, I want to steelman this on their own terms. The argument for it is that, look, if we ally ourselves with these kind of far right, reactionary, social conservative, these are the people who are going to help us tear down the state. They're super anti-establishment. They're our natural allies for this program of kind of, so in order to make that work, we need to ditch some of our more liberal positions on abortion and gay rights and race and immigration. And so that had always, and from that going forward, and with the Mises Institute in Alabama, and people in this orbit, including Ron Paul. If you remember when Ron Paul ran for president, there was these newsletters that came out, and it was so scandalous because it was all just flagrantly racist crap that he'd been sending out in these newsletters in the early 90s. That was all coming from this scene.
Okay, so a few items there. One, Rothbard is a Jew, and then he is lamenting the loss of David Duke. That didn't happen. So Dave Smith does a great breakdown of this. I don't have the episode number, and it actually reads it off there, and it's the strategy. It's not lamenting the David Duke loss. It's talking about the strategy and what was taken care of. Yes, maybe ingratiating yourselves to more the right rather than the left. Rothbard had been a serpentine snake, gone back and forth between both sides, trying to figure out the one that could get him to the finish line the best. And he was indicating that don't take on David Duke, but take on the David Duke strategy of what he had done of co-opting the Republican Party of such. So I don't even know it all verbatim, but that's the idea there. Hoppe was a big fan and is of Rothbard, a Jew. I don't think he's a white nationalist either. Then you've got Ron Paul. Okay, there's some newsletters. I don't know what the whole deal is. The pretty much everyone understands he did not write them. He issued them out. I don't know if it was Lou Rockwell or someone else. I haven't even read them to know what those things are. Shame on him for having that happen. But if you've ever listened to him and been around him, and he was just recently at the bash with Maj Touré Zubi, you don't hear racist stuff coming from Ron Paul. So you want to talk about a newsletter. Okay, I don't know. You've had Robert Byrd in the Democratic Party. You have other people that have changed. Have they? I don't know. What else do we have there? I think that's it for those parts. Okay, so just a few more left. I know. I appreciate anybody who's hung on with us. I do appreciate this. Once again, DL, screw you for taking my idea. This one is Nazis, Klansmen.
Well, I think there's definitely, immediately right now for my friends who are like, what do I do? I think that's the right answer is find your.
That was the question. What do you do about the Libertarian Party? Do you join it? Do you try to take it back over? What?
Local issue advocacy, YIMBY groups have been a popular choice. I told people go join your neoliberal chapter meetup. And I don't want to get off on the weeds. At some point, maybe we can have the discussion why I'm not a neoliberal. I am still a libertarian, but a lot of the certainly, I know from what I've seen of your group and your project that people who think like us are welcome, and you're working on a lot of good issues that are important to us. On the party politics angle, just kind of in brief, one, I don't think retaking the Libertarian Party is worthwhile. I don't think it's going to happen, and two, I don't think it's worthwhile even if it could happen. I've described it to people as, do you really want to stick around to reclaim the moldy corpse in a few years? The brand value wasn't that great to begin with, as a lot of people know, but it's just going to be, it's going to be irretrievably tainted after this. There has been some talk of new party, and I'm a big electoral reform guy, like Joe mentioned. That's one of the things I work on in my day job. I do believe the two-party system in America.
Okay, we're not going to go. I didn't mix up the two. That was supposed to be the next one, and the other one's going to be the final one then. Who was recently in charge, the party? If it's a crap brand to begin with, and I don't want to be associated with a crap. If this doesn't work out and we can't get this turned around, I'm done with it too. Okay, and so that's kind of the idea. So the hope was to turn it around, but you're saying you were perfectly fine of having a crap. How did this happen? Well, you had a crap brand, and you're on a podcast with the guy that had been the leader of the pile of crap. So, congrats for you, Andy Craig, for understanding that. Okay, I think this is the last. Is this the last one? I don't know. We'll see. I think it is. No, we have one more after this. So this was the Nazi one, Klansman one that I meant to play. I believe 42. Yep. 43 minutes in, play it away.
I worked on Gary Johnson's campaign. That was a lot of the vision of what we had. That was our target audience, the liberal center, people who are fiscally conservative and socially liberal, or there is that voter block out there, and we know from polling evidence that exists. From recruiting these people and organizing them into chapters, they exist. But those people don't want to come hang out with Klansmen. So you've got to pick one or the other, and the Libertarian Party chose poorly.
Klansman. It's almost unbelievable. Klansman it's shocking, but yet this is how disingenuous once again. And this is why, by the way, you can't give these guys credit anymore. They've gone over. This is the Amber Heard saying that she was raped with a ripped up, a broken bottle, okay, in her vagina, destroyed it. And she didn't, go to the doctor. She didn't have any signs. No one could tell that she was walking different. And she didn't take any pictures of it. It's so outrageous that you just have to say, you know what, you're a piece of shit, and we're not gonna believe you anymore. Okay, I think this is the last one, very last clip we got here. This one, it talks about being the bankrupt donors and leaving.
It's gonna fade away very quickly. They're going to lose their ballot access. They're going to go. I mean, they basically already are bankrupt. All the donors leave. So if you are somebody who, like I do, coming from the kind of Gary Johnson vision of what this could be, if you still want to do third party electoral politics, I wouldn't say that's not something that's potentially worthwhile. But it's not going to happen in any way associated or affiliated with or within the National Libertarian Party.
Okay. So it's all bankrupt. The donors have gone. And once again, this is the week after, because these guys have been trying to ruin it from the inside. And then these two had left. They still know all this stuff, but they had left a year in. So they didn't even stay to fight. At least Nick Sarwark has stayed to fight. So what's the idea of this? One, you don't get to make blatant accusations that are so ripe. I mean, these are things like if I was a white nationalist, my family would probably disown me. Okay, these are, and I would have trouble at my job. I mean, that's literally what they're doing here. Remember, Nick was willing to call the cops on a guy that could ruin his life, saying that he had assaulted him when that obviously wasn't the case. And then, like any dumb attorney, he didn't want any video evidence of it, right? So that didn't make any sense either. So you've got that. So that's one thing. And then two is, this is the prime example and reason why I think Plank 3.5 should have been removed, because it takes away their ability to use it like a sword. Just don't associate with pieces of shit, right? I don't like racists. I don't want to be around that kind of stuff. So you don't associate yourself with that, and you leave it a different kind of life, and you promote different kind of experiences and philosophies and principles in your life, and that's perfectly fine. Yes, maybe those things are irrational and repugnant, but who is making the decision of what that standard is? And that the problem is, it's these two jokers. These two jokers have been pretty much in charge here, and along with Nick, and they're willing to say Dave Smith is a white supremacist. That's I didn't even know what to say. I mean, the guy shook my hand. He's definitely, he might be, maybe he is. No, he's not. Thank you everybody for hanging in here. don't go listen to the episode yourself, because I've taken the time. I went through it myself. I broke it down for you. Check out DL's. Now I'll go and listen to DL's. See if he did the same thing as me. I'm sure he did much better. I think he had written script out, so he at least had a better idea of what he was saying. And I just did it off the cuff. So I hope you enjoyed it. Libertarian Podcast Review, episode 49. What do we got going on next? No clue. Take care. Love y'all.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast, I can't find it anywhere, and they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke, yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger.
Like,
I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.